Well, first of all, we've got to be able to develop our backups, because we're going to be defined by those guys, later in the year, and so we all know what that's like, when we get into November and those midweek games and the MAC games and guys getting hurt. So the biggest thing is be able to develop those guys and get them ready to go. Um, you know, so obviously it starts up front, with us and developing the inside guys right now, and then for us, we've got to get better at certain things that we weren't very good at last year, and that's what we're putting an emphasis on. Pass defense, red zone defense. So those areas we've got to get better at. So, and again, the turnover thing. It's kind of funny. We've been in years where we've practiced like crazy on turnovers and didn't do very well, and it's kind of one of those things that it just kind of feeds upon itself as the season goes on, and that was huge for us to be able to give the offense extra possessions out there on the field. But and the other thing is the best defense is going to be the one that's sitting on the sideline. So no pressure, Tim. But our offense did such a great job last year running the ball, and and I think it all fed off. We fed off of them; they fed off of us, and it's a team game. It's not just us. So but anyway, it's development, and continue to practice at a very high, intense manner right now.
You mentioned you got to build depth, and Frank talked about this depth inside the tackle. How is that shaking out right now? I know you've had 1 week of fall camp, but what does that look like as of today?
Well, we've got Cole Baker and Brian Arp running with the ones, but those guys that are running in there, Kaim Caesar and Marcus Coleman and Brian Arp, those guys need reps. I mean, that's the biggest thing, in this game. It's all about how many reps you can get, how many things you can see out there on the field, and develop your muscle memory so that things become natural to you. So we just got to get those guys a ton of reps, and they're doing a good job right now.
I think it was Marcus who's come a long way. Kane's had some injury issues, missed the spring.
He did.
How do you make up for lost time?
Well, you just get it again. That's what I'm talking about. That's the rep thing. Zach Burke, same thing. Those guys all got to get out there, and it's all about how many reps we can get them in practice right now. And so that's the development part. And the more we can get them reps, then the better they're going to be. So it's work in progress right now.
Guys that have had reps on your line are the ends. That room, it feels like it could be a really talented pass rushing room if those guys develop. What do you feel about the defensive ends?
We feel really good about the defensive ends right now. Obviously, we got Will Evans, who's been voted team captain by his peers. We have Amos, Ogoun Seymour, who's developing. Thank you, Tim. It's not an easy one to say, but he's not only developing as a player but as a person. He's come a long way since he stepped foot on campus, and so it's just the development of those guys has been outstanding. Austin Conrad has done an outstanding job for us. Sam McKnight has been a steady guy to come in and be a role player for us at defensive end. Chuck Woo, another guy. He's a role player. He's been in and out with some injury stuff, but you know what? The guy works his tail off, and we find ways to get him on the field. And then there's some young guys that are developing right now, but those guys that are up the bat right now, there's a lot of speed there. A couple of those guys are faster than some of everybody else on the defense. So we're just as fast. So feel pretty good about those guys.
What does it mean to the secondary to have not only Javon back in his 3 years of being a starter, but essentially your top 4 corners, maybe your 4 of your top 5 corners, something like that. Is that enough pieces or enough experience returning that you expect to make a big jump in some of those metrics against the pass?
Well, yeah, and again, D'Angelo does a great job with those guys. It's development, it's work in progress. All those guys have shined at times, and between Jamal Hudson, he and Javon have been mentioned for some preseason honors, which actually don't mean a thing to me. So those guys got to get out there and prove themselves every day. Once they start reading articles and awards and things like that, then they're going to be in trouble. So our thing is to make sure that they're getting out there and practicing at a high level and developing themselves. But the corner position is very competitive right now. D'Lo's rolling those guys in, and they're getting out there. Elias and Xavier Motley have both really come on. I mean, they have worked hard, and they've got some talent. Marlin Brooks, I know you guys, if you've been out there, the guy's dynamic. He's got a dynamic personality, and the players feed off of him. Javon, same thing. The players feed off of that guy. He has come a long ways as well. He's been a good player for us, but he's been a team captain for 3 years. But you know what? He's really developing, and guys really gravitate toward him. So, but he's out there busting his tail. So, it's fun to watch those guys compete.
Same thing as Tim, whether it's schematically or from developmental standpoint, what would you like to see in place or kind of accomplished by the end of fall camp to let you know that you're starting the season on a good, on the right foot, so to speak?
Well, we've got a base defense, and we really hang our hat on certain calls that we carry from week to week. So it's just basically, we call it our staple of calls, and that's what we have done here the first 5 days. We've put those calls in, and that is what we hang our hat on. Then we start to design some third down stuff as we go. So we're going to start doing some third down situations now, and so we'll start designing some third down defenses, and and again, we have some staple third down stuff too. But you want to be able to attack protections. So whether that's leaving 4 guys, defensive ends on the field, is it 4 defensive linemen on the field? Is it bring in 5 DBs, 6 DBs? The biggest thing for us is get the best 11 guys on the field and figure out how the metric's going to work. So.
Who are some first-year guys that will either surprise or maybe not surprise you guys, but who may break through for the first time this fall and be contributors on the defense?
Good question. Through 5 days, we've got a ways to go with those guys. I'd hate to mention anybody's name right now. I just don't think it would be fair to those guys. I think, again, and Tim mentioned this, the 4-game rule, redshirt rule, is huge. And so we're going to continue to develop those guys, and hopefully they're able to get in and get some reps as the season goes on, whether it's through special teams or, getting their feet wet that way or actually coming out on the field. But I think there's some guys there that, are developing. But, obviously we've got some guys in front of them that are trying to hold them off too. So, but it's work in progress. You could ask me that question here in a couple weeks, and I might have a better answer for you.
I mean, you comment on every other position group, but the linebackers, if you just wanted to put a comment on what they've done, what you're expecting from them too.
Deep. I mean, they've got there's a lot of competition going on there. Again, we're deep. We've got guys that have started for us: Dylan Connor, Jared Dorsa, Eric Pop. Those guys have been with us for a while now, then we've got a good solid backup crew behind them, and those guys are all battling right now. So we feel very good about that position, and really where it's going to show up is in special teams. I mean, those guys will all be a part of special teams, not only at linebacker but at safety. So we feel very good about those two positions in terms of depth. So again, Javon's been the one that's had a lot of reps. Jaron Hampton's getting out and he's running with the ones right now, but the guys that are behind them are developing and need the reps. So you'll see those guys, in practice, you'll see them out there a lot because they're competing right now. Same with the linebackers. You'll see those first three guys out, and then the rest of those guys, man, they're competing their tails off trying to establish themselves. But we feel good about them right now. So